Cool. Well, first of all, thank you for sending us. Christian and I were the messengers this year in Indianapolis. I think in 4 years it's going to be back in Indianapolis. A lot of people have asked me, how was Indianapolis? Like, well, the business meeting was very fruitful, I think, to some extent. But Indianapolis is, no offense, but if you're from there, it's a rather unremarkable city that I could tell. I was looking for like that thing that they're famous for that I could eat and never really found it. Anyway, we had a little bit of fun. We got to go outside a little bit and enjoy a not so hot and humid weather. So first I'd start off with some like roll call. So you can see here over almost 11,000 messengers. I was voting messengers there. 3,100 guests. Guests aren't messengers. These are people that are kind of observers, and then almost 3,000 exhibitors. So the expo hall was hopping pretty much all the time. So it had almost 17,000 total attendees. But a little bit on day one. So we checked into our hotel. If you see on the left-hand side, when we walk right into our Airbnb, turn left, and there's a big chalkboard corner there. It says, "Welcome to Naptown, USA, West Indy." And I was like, Naptown, what's that about? Indianapolis, Nap is in the name. And I was like, man, first thing I thought of was Layla would love this place. And then, to the right, you see this like picture collage, and it's just a bunch of artists. So downstairs was a music studio, which if I should have read, it was in the information, but yes, it was very loud. So most of you know I love trees, like making things out of trees. So part of our Monday festivities was going out to play around at disc golf, and I found this really awesome tree that kind of twists as it grew up. So if you can look right to the right of that tree, there's like a park bench. It's a normal sized park bench, but that just shows the scale of how large this beautiful tree was. That was more for my benefit than anything else. This one right here, I call this Pastor Christian and Corey Go to White Castle. Not this White Castle, but this White Castle. And I'll tell you this, I wasn't impressed. Like, I'm not a huge Whataburger fan, but Whataburger is way better than this. Okay, so Monday afternoon, we met with a group of primarily abolitionists and people that are like pro-law amendment. Towards the middle, on the right-hand side, is Pastor Brian Gunter from Louisiana. On the left-hand side, sitting in the chair with the gray jacket on, is Senator Dusty Devers. But kind of in that group and towards the back in there with the white beard, that's Clay Hall. A lot of these guys are people that you may or may not see. If anybody watched the live stream of the SBC, any part of it, a little bit of it, yeah, you will see these faces at the microphones. In fact, year over year, you probably hear Dusty's voice more than anybody that's on here, probably more frequently than anybody else. And more consistently, you'll see Brian Gunter every year posing questions to our friends at the ERLC. So the main point for going to the SBC is to conduct business. It's a business meeting. Part of what we do there is elections for people that are going to be in leadership positions within the SBC, reports from the different entities that tell us what they've been working on, reports from the seminaries that are affiliated with the SBC, talking about what they're doing to help equip pastors for servant roles. Then we have the businessy side of it, which is making new motions, so directing the businesses, issuing and debating resolutions. All of these things are really important in helping kind of steer the ship in the direction that we want the SBC to go, which is why in particular it's important that we show up. Even if our church can send 2 messengers. Last year, if y'all remember Saddleback Church, massive church. They give a lot more money. They're not part of the SBC anymore, but they gave a lot more money as a part of their ability, because they're a mega church, to the SBC, but they're only allowed to have 12. So you're allowed to have between 2 and 12 messengers to the SBC. So no one church that has a massive amount of money or what have you can have that same equating of influence. So what was interesting here is we have 2 days to get a lot of stuff done. So we had 3 sessions on Tuesday and 2 on Wednesday. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to roll through and try to get through this stuff relatively quickly, because I want to leave room for Q&A at the end. The start of a business meeting is adopting the, things like the schedule, and adopting, the registration, like how many people are here, all that kind of stuff. So registration report was number 1. That's the slide I showed you where how many people were there. Committee on order of business. What do? They make the outline for how we spend our time. They also can make motions to extend time here and there. So they did that multiple times while the messengers were introducing new motions and debating resolutions. Which is smart, because that's why we're here. You have some people that are just very long-winded that take up everybody else's time. So they're courteous enough most of the time to give us extra time to do that stuff. If there's one thing that you can make fun of the SBC for, it's having a thing called the Committee on Committees. It's like having a meeting to talk about what our next meeting is going to be about. I don't think I could do it justice, because I don't have the bylaws in front of me to explain exactly what they do. But as it was explained from the floor, the reason why a Committee on Committees is important is because if we look at the conservative resurgence, the body elected conservative leadership, who then nominated theologically conservative people to the Committee on Committees, who then nominated conservative people to the Committee on Nominations. The Committee on Nominations elects all the trustees, all the people that the institutions and entities are accountable to. So what's really important is that every election is important and has downstream consequences, just like our local elections. By the way, if you're not registered to vote, in our local elections, there are some voter registration cards in the back. Any questions so far? Haven't got to the meat and potatoes yet, but no? Okay. Okay. Oh, no, I missed a fun part. Sorry, that TV is not big enough for me to see all my notes here, so I printed them out. The Committee on Nomination Reports, they give us a bulletin. Here's the Tuesday bulletin. It's 20 pages front and back. And on Tuesday morning, we get this bulletin, and if you go towards the back, you'll see pages of people's names. And the committees, the nominations are here. We don't get them till Tuesday morning, which is a little frustrating because we're supposed to vote on them not knowing who they are until the morning we're supposed to vote on them, so I can't go Google these people and figure out if they're good. So one of my potential motions next year, if we return, is to get that on what's called the Book of Reports, which is actually published online weeks before the meeting. It's also available on a handy app, and then you get a paper copy of it when you're registered. So if we could get those here, then we can do a little bit more research on that and be a little bit more diligent. But with that, the first fun part was introduction of new motions. Now, new motions is where people get to tell the business or tell the entities what they want them to do. So I'll kind of read through these, and somebody can stop me if you want to hear more details on it. I'll probably hover over a few of them. Allow the ERLC to get funds from outside the SBC. Now, ERLC is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, headed by Brent Leatherwood, which is hard for me to say without disgust in my mouth. Sorry. That one was referred to the executive committee. What I found interesting is that they want to fund the ERLC from outside the SBC. Now, the problem I see with that is whoever is paying gets to essentially direct that entity. So I can tell the ERLC what to do if I'm paying their salaries, right? However, the stipulations related in here were that they maintain all their accountability to the SBC executive committee. So the person that made this motion was not making this because they're for the ERLC. It's because they're against some of the actions that the ERLC is taking, and they wanted accountability measures to be put into place. There's actually a heavy emphasis on the affirmation of the Nicene Creed. There was one motion to have the messengers affirm the Nicene Creed, which was ruled out of order because it's really something that should be in a resolution. How the messengers speak is resolutions. Motions are more directed towards entities. Amend the Baptist Faith and Message to include the Nicene Creed. There was another one that says we want the preamble to include Nicene Creed, Athanasian Creed, and what was the other? There was another one, Apostles' Creed. So those were referred to the executive committee. Another huge push was to push for financial transparency. So amend business and financial plan to require all the entities to disclose the same financial information as a 990 audit. So that's saying we want transparency. We want to see we give you like hundreds of millions of dollars. We want to know what you do with it. Amend the Baptist Faith. Okay, I already said that one. Request the resignation of ERLC President Brent Leatherwood. That was ruled as out of order. Lifeway to produce a homeschool curriculum. That was automatically referred, but I thought it was pretty good. I mean, a lot of people take issue with the quality of Lifeway stuff in general, but I think that's a step in the right direction. Executive committee to form a task force to study feasibility of remote participation. There's a very small amount of churches that show up to this thing. There's 16,000 people in the room, and you can see, I mean, it's like a sea of people, but that's still a very small percentage of SBC churches. If we could leverage technology to allow for remote participation, it would be limited, and we could probably fit them into voting, but it'd be very difficult for them to make motions and stuff like that. It's a huge technical hurdle to overcome, but if we want to encourage more participation, we may have to figure out how to do that. So that was referred to the executive committee to investigate that. A motion to reallocate ERLC funding to the IMB. So there's another push. There's a lot of people that are really upset with the ERLC. Some of the stuff that they've been doing over the last few years under the new leadership. There was a lot of frustration with the past leadership, and we all thought that, hey, getting new leadership would help, right the ship in the right direction. But people are really frustrated, so they say, we want to make a motion to, instead of paying these guys, we'll just redirect that to missionaries. It's hard to argue with that. NAMB is the North American Mission Board. To submit to a forensic audit. So again, financial transparency. Enable remote participation. So that's just a rehash. Any questions so far?
Maybe you just said this, but just the referral thing is like when a messenger gets up to move that the gathered messengers take an action, then the parliamentarians rule on that. And there are some things that go straight to the floor and the messengers get to carry it forward. There are other things that parliamentarians an entity head, or actually that should be referred to the executive committee. So all these things that got referred, it's like the messengers are chomping at the bit to like take a vote on this thing and make it happen, but it has to get referred to these entities or committees.
Yeah, and the Committee on Order of Business is the one that decides what to do with each of these motions, and then they make a recommendation to the president on what to do. Things can be overruled and things like that, but that's essentially how things get kind of divvied up. Continuing with the Tuesday morning session, North American Mission Board did an honoring of chaplains, which I would say is worth watching. Their North American Mission Board presentation was interesting. I actually thought Mike McBain would get a kick out of this because there was a guy that leads a bunch of Baptist churches in Canada that was talking about how much they're thriving up there. But North American Mission Board planted over 11,000 churches. Some people take issue with some of the stuff that they're doing, but I think they're doing a pretty fantastic job. They do a lot with enabling people that are, starting new churches and not satellites, but sending church plants. Yeah, church plants from other churches. So they do a lot with enabling that. Then we have the IMB sending celebration. Now, I would highly recommend that you watch this. I'll send out some links for it so y'all can have figure out where the live stream was. But the IMB sending ceremony gets me every year. Now, this whole thing is a big emotional roller coaster for me. I'm really happy, then I'm really emotional and I want to cry, and then I get really mad, and then then I get really hungry. So but the IMB sending ceremony gets me every year. I mean, we had 83 new missionaries hitting the field. Each one of them, the ones that can explain who they are and where they're going, they stand in front of the screen, talk about what they're doing, how we can be praying for them. I think over half this year had to be introduced from behind the screen, meaning they're using fake names and not telling you, but more than a generality of what part of the world they're going to. This year, they did actually publicize the prayer requests from these 83 missionaries. We printed these out. They're stapled up and over there on the missions wall. I'd highly recommend taking one of these home with you. Following that. Okay. So, election of recording secretary, there's only one person on there. It wasn't very interesting. And then we had more motions. So any questions before I move on to the next set of motions? And I didn't get all of them. I didn't take the exhaustive list of motions. I just grabbed some of them that I thought were interesting. Okay. There was a motion to censure Al Mohler, Ben Mandrell, who's the guy from Lifeway, and Bart Barber, who's the president was the president of the SBC, for signing an amicus brief related to sexual abuse. I don't know all the details here. I don't even know a lot of the details here. But it was very interesting that somebody would try to censure a sitting president of a seminary head, and the sitting president of Lifeway. Apparently there was an amicus brief filed in a federal court case that halted somebody that was I guess a victim of sexual abuse from being able to speak. I don't know all the details, so don't hold me to it. There was a lot of back and forth because this one actually went to debate on the floor where everybody mentioned got to actually speak to the defense of their actions. And essentially the outcome was they can't say much because the lawyers told them they couldn't. And it was ruled out of order, but then overruled. Sorry, it was overruled by the body to say it was out of order. So it was originally going to be referred, but then it got ruled out of order. Okay. North American Mission.
Does that mean that they are not going to be censured?
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Bart Barber, excuse himself to from chairing the meeting at that moment, he was under consideration for censure. So we actually got to see a first vice president do something.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was wearing this like Hawaiian shirt.
in pink pants.
I didn't plan on getting up here to talk today. And, but anyway, so they venture us all up in that.
Oh, sorry.
Some of the concerns were that this particular case under consideration had exceeded the statute of limitations. Also, there have been a lot of legitimate accusations of abuse that have been brought forward, but also some not legitimate ones. I think that's some of the concern in this particular case.
Yeah. Okay, North American Mission Board to form a task force to fund Christian schools in North America. I think this is a really interesting thing to do, right? So we have a lot of churches that have a fantastic building that is empty 6 days a week during the day, right? So can the North American Mission Board find a way to encourage churches to let Christian schools utilize that space? That would be a really interesting thing to see, like, right? So could they help fund that, or you know, that it's worth consideration, right? Assign a blue ribbon committee to examine the possibility of a new Baptist Faith and Message. So our Baptist Faith and Message, which is the kind of governing document of the SBC, the latest version is from 2000. The argument for this was had an increasing amount of amendments to the BF&M lately. Perhaps it's worth looking at making a newer version of this that will at least address it for the next 20 or 30 years. That one got referred. Sorry, that one lost to a vote, so that one got shot down. ERLC to issue an apology to the executive committee. This is, I believe, from when Russell Moore was the leader of the ERLC, where the leader of the ERLC made accusations of covering up sexual abuse that ended up costing over $14 million of cooperative program funding, which is the money that churches give to the SBC, right? So you have tithe dollars being used to expose somebody's slander. So executive committee to investigate how to best minister to those with special needs. That I thought was interesting and probably overdue. Executive committee to publish all money spent on legal fees from 21 to 24. So again, financial transparency. Revive entities code of conduct related to alcohol. That was referred to all entities. Essentially, almost all institutions within the SBC have like a zero tolerance policy for alcohol. I think is it Midwestern or Southwestern that has like a minimal tolerance policy for alcohol, and essentially stating that the rest of the entities should modify to that standard. Form an ad hoc committee to study ecclesiology related to the biblical teaching of plurality of elders and the function of deacons within the church. So essentially, what is the best way to handle elders and deacons? Executive committee to schedule any payments over $5,000. So there was an underlying question of, is the executive committee, is North American Mission Board, are they paying to bring a bunch of messengers in? Because then essentially all of us are paying our own way through our churches. Are the entities using cooperative program dollars to send people that would qualify as messengers to essentially sway a vote one way or the other? Keep in mind, the biggest vote we had on the table this year was a law amendment, which failed by a very narrow margin. Spoiler alert. If you haven't heard that by now, I'm sorry. That's okay. Executive committee to publish contact information for trustees. Now, they've refused to do this in the past. So remember, the trustees are the people that the SBC puts in as accountability for leadership of these different institutions. So the seminaries probably being one of the key parts of this. So people like Al Mohler are accountable to a group of trustees. They're the ones that help kind of set the direction of the institutions. But they've been behind an iron curtain. Like, we haven't been able to contact them and find out either who they are or how to get a hold of them to tell them that, hey, we're holding you accountable as the SBC, as the body, that you need to make sure that we're maintaining not just fiscal responsibility, but theological responsibility as well. And then executive committee to form a task force on studying long-term effects of vaccine mandates. This was directed to the IMB and then broadened to other entities as well. That was referred to the executive committee. Then there was two more motions that were really controversial. One was remove the Pledge of Allegiance from all convention activities. That went to a very interesting debate. I couldn't replay it with my mouth. You would have to go watch it. I did go talk to the guy that was debating against the motion, and he was very fervent on his belief there. Then the last one is abolish the ERLC. Now that actually went to a vote, and it failed by about 70 to 30. Now, it's interesting that it got that much support, actually. I think more people were surprised that it got that much support. So there was one more that
Probably the worst, it is the worst entity currently in SBC. It's involved in political action, political life, and just keeps making blunder after blunder after blunder.
yeah.
In favor of putting in mosques, but against religious liberty.
So Brent Leatherwood from the ERLC has fought for red flag laws in Tennessee. He was one of the first names on a letter that was sent to legislators in Louisiana the day of a bill that would abolish abortion in Louisiana. Him and 77 pro-life organizations penned a letter that says we do not and will never support a bill of abolition of abortion. And that bill, while it had the votes going into chamber, lost those votes because of that letter. And the ERLC and Brent Leatherwood was the signatory of that letter. But there's one more motion. I snagged a video of this. I figured if this works. Oh, Jess, I broke it. Nope. All right. Yeah. Yes, sir. And he's taller than, like in real life, he's way taller.
Microphone 5. Microphone 5A. Would you please state your name, your church, and your motion?
Mr. President, my name is Curtis Kennemer. I am a messenger from Central Baptist Church.
You don't look that old to me, I just want to say.
Okay. I didn't catch that, but maybe I'm too old. I don't know. I move that the messengers of the 2024 SBC annual meeting request that the trustees of our entities, including our seminaries and all our boards and commissions, explain how Calvinist/Reformed theology is compatible with the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, and consider eliminating the teaching and promotion of Calvinist/Reformed theology from all SBC entities, and report their findings and any resulting action steps to the 2025 SBC annual meeting. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Okay. So that's what I expect. So there was a motion to figure out if Calvinist theology is in line with the Baptist Faith and Message, and I was like, Come on, man. If you look at
Microphone
it,
5.
hold on.
Microphone.
There we go. So this is a meme off of Twitter. This is a guy with his like eyebrow raised. Okay, I'm already out of time, so I'll skip to resolutions. Oh, it was referred to the executive committee. I'm sure they got a good laugh out of it too.
If you haven't looked at the BFM 2000 language, it clearly teaches that regeneration precedes faith. So it is a Calvinistic document that Arminians don't, maybe they don't get that it's Calvinistic, but BFM is explicitly Calvinistic.
Yeah. So there were some controversial resolutions. I'll skip to those, okay? On defending religious liberty, there was actually objection to this one on the grounds that any time, and I think this is a misunderstanding. Yeah, you got there? Okay, thanks. There was a misunderstanding of what this resolution says. People were thinking that we want essentially like a Christian government where, like what there was in medieval Europe. And there was a lot of debate on the floor over, and it sounded like a lot of the theonomy debate, right? Like either Jesus is Lord or, it ended up getting amended and then adopted. So that ended up going through. There was one on just war theory. There were some amendments being proposed, but the amendments failed, and then I would say I've got a copy of both of the bulletins for Tuesday and Wednesday. All the resolutions in full are in here if you want to read them. They're also available on the website as well. Where'd it go? Okay, yeah, so the one on just war got pushed through. Back to resolutions. Let's see. And I know, Pastor Christian, I know you want to get up here, so I'm happy to make these notes public knowledge if you want them. Probably one of the most contentious resolutions was the one on ethical realities of reproductive technologies and the dignity of the human embryo. So this is one talking about IVF. There were people speaking for and against. Both for and against arguments were very passionate, very personal. People on both sides of this argument have very compelling reasons why they are for or against. If you want to hear my position on it, I'm glad to tell you. But other than that, thank you. I'll turn things over to Pastor Christian. Oh, it passed without amendment. So it passed as it sat. When that was authored by Al Mohler, I believe.
Yeah, Corey has the truly difficult job of trying to cram everything that happened over those 2 days into 30 minutes right now. So anyway, it's a lot, and it's hard to kind of pick and choose. It's a lot to take in the first time you go to the SBC too. But anyway, yeah, a couple of the highlights. That one, the IVF resolution that was brought forward was authored by Albert Mohler and co-authored by Andrew Walker, who actually holds a position within the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the ERLC. So there are some good people, even in an otherwise not great entity. But it was a good resolution, and basically the gist of it is that we do not want to see the destruction of human embryos, right? As a result of using IVF technologies, we don't want to see fertilized eggs that are frozen and then later destroyed, because those are precious lives, right? So that's the gist of the resolution, which passed overwhelmingly. There was a church that was voted to be removed, so I don't know which order to say these in. The law amendment did fail. So the law amendment, I think Mike Law is the guy's name who brought it forward, but it's just to even further clarify the language we use with reference to complementarianism, that only men may be pastors, but it is like only a man is qualified by Scripture to be any kind of pastor. So that strengthens it even further to where, well, what about a women's pastor, a children's pastor, a lady who has the title of pastor? She's not exercising authority over men, but she still has the title pastor. What about that? And the law amendment says that any kind of pastor, so it further strengthens it. So that motion was made last year, and in order for it was it would have been an alteration, an amendment to the SBC Constitution. So in order for that to happen, you have to get a 2/3 majority vote of the messengers in 2 successive conventions. So the motion was raised last year. The messengers voted. Over 66% of the messengers were in favor of clarifying and strengthening the language to say that only a man may be any kind of pastor. That was also last year when Rick Warren's church was removed from the SBC. This year, we had to get another 2/3 vote in order for that to go into effect. We got 61%, so the motion failed. So a majority of the messengers wanted to see the law amendment pass, but we didn't get 2 years in a row over 66% of the messengers to vote in favor of that. I think, and weirdly, there was a lot of opposition from SBC leadership to that amendment, which is weird. I think probably practically it would have created an administrative nightmare for the credentials committee, because they have to investigate each and every one of these churches. And so they spent the year doing that for one church and then reporting on it at the convention. So like every church that has a children's pastor that's a lady, or a women's pastor that's a lady, credentials committee would then be investigating all of these churches. So I think they shouldn't be using the language of pastor. Whenever I was the youth pastor at our church but wasn't ordained, I was called the youth director, and I was perfectly fine with that because I hadn't been ordained. Let's have children's directors. Let's have women's directors. We don't need to use the terminology of pastor, but I think that probably that's part of the issue of why there is some resistance. But anyway, just a little bit more on some of the important resolutions that happen. So I'm going to try to cover a couple of things quickly, and then we do want to allow some time for discussion here in this context, but certainly as we go out from this place, any questions or conversation you guys want to have, and even if need be, we can carry it into Sunday school on Sunday. 2 things in particular I want to do. I guess I'm actually trying to do 3 things, but there are a couple of kind of specific questions that have been raised in the past about how our church, the money that our church spends in giving to the cooperative program. Also, what are some of the pros of us being part of the SBC? What are the benefits of being part of the SBC? So here's an attempt to answer some of those questions. And then maybe just talk about, so long as we are voluntarily choosing to associate with the SBC, how should we think about that? So that's kind of what I want to do with the few minutes I have here. That's what this is. If you were looking at this and like, I don't know what page he's on, sorry. Corey was doing his part up here. I'm doing my part right here, okay? So in terms of costs, we give $1,200 annually to the cooperative program, so $100 a month. Part of the reason that we've chosen that amount is we have thought historically, or maybe it was the case historically, or maybe we were mistaken, but that we were required to give at least $100 a month. I think in particular, we were thinking that in order to have Guidestone contribute an extra amount to our 403B plans, that you had to give a minimum amount. So that was why we were giving $100 a month. We'll look further into that, but that doesn't seem to be the case as I was investigating it a little bit. So we can do some more digging to see if that is the case, but what I saw most everywhere else is that there is no required minimum amount of giving to the SBC. Historically, we've given $1,200, and I think we can feel good about giving $1,200 to the SBC when the majority of that goes to world missions. But just for the sake of argument, I don't think it's necessarily required. If there is a catch as it relates to 403B plans and Guidestone contributing, it's like $1,750 a month for that, so it totals up to $200-something, then that might be a reason why we want to continue to give that amount. But anyway, what we have done historically is given $1,200 a year. So we're part of the Southern Baptists of Texas, so 45% of that money is kept in state. So the Southern Baptist of Texas convention is one of the better state conventions. So a lot of our money goes to our state convention, which we are seeking to, at least we're interested in trying to participate more actively with our state convention. So 45% of those dollars that we give, go to them. The other 55% goes to the cooperative program, which is the SBC, the national entity, right? And then here's kind of a breakdown of that 55%. There was once upon a time where I saw a nice pie chart, and I was trying to find that, and I couldn't find it. So the best thing that I could find was a sample budget breakdown from 2021 and 2022. But this gives you an idea of where the cooperative program money goes in terms of percentages. So in 2021 and 2022 budget, 50% goes to the IMB, 22% to the North American Missions Board, NAM, 22% to the 6 SBC seminaries, 2.99% to the SBC operating budget, 1.65% to the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. So the least amount of money goes to the ERLC, and you can maybe understand part of that motion why people wanted them to be able to seek funding elsewhere, because little of the budget goes to the ERLC. But that's a bit of a breakdown. So 45% stays in state, 55% goes to the national convention, and there's kind of a breakdown of what happens with those dollars, if that makes sense. So a couple of specific questions, because we've wanted to know about, okay, if we're going to cooperate with the SBC, we want to have a voice within the SBC. We want to be able to send messengers. So what's required of us to do that? So what is the minimum amount a church can give in order to be considered a cooperating church and therefore be eligible to send messengers? You'll see bolded, the convention does not set a minimum amount. So some of this is exploratory for us as the elders, answering specific questions that either you all have raised or we have raised. So SBC does not set a minimum amount in order for our church to be considered. We have to give something, but it doesn't have like this set amount. Must my church give through the cooperative program to be considered a cooperating church? This is kind of answered a little bit more clearly down below under on the next page, where eligibility to send voting church messengers. But either we can give to the cooperative program or we can give to one of the SBC entities, so IMB, NAM, the seminaries, ERLC, we won't do that, or to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering or to the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. So there is, a lot of this is like conversations that the elders are very actively having, but for the sake of argument, we could choose to just say, hey, we're going to send $1,200 specifically to Lottie Moon, and that's where our $1,200 is going to go. We're allocating it, rather than putting it in a big pot and say, yeah, give some of it to the RLC, we could say we're going to send it all to Lottie Moon, and I think still be eligible to send messengers. There is somewhat of a question of if it affects our benefits that are offered to us by the SBC. I think the answer, though, is no, as far as I can tell, except for maybe this 403B question. So I'm rifling through this stuff. There will be time for questions here in a moment, so y'all can take a note down on the paper if there's any of this you want to come back to. So what do we have to do in order to send messengers to the SBC? Two things. We need to be identified as a cooperating Southern Baptist church through a credentialing process. Basically, does this church affirm the BF&M 2000? The answer is yes. And have we made contributions to convention work? And you'll see here ways that we can get at that. Churches must have made cooperative program or other Southern Baptist Convention contributions, such as Lottie Moon or Annie Armstrong, through a state convention or made contributions directly to SBC through the SBC Executive Committee, blah, 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 blah. That's what I was talking about a moment ago. So in addition to the $1,200 that we give to the cooperative program, we spend some amount of money in getting our messengers to the convention. Sometimes that's cheaper, like it was just recently in New Orleans, so Corey and I drove. This last convention was in Indianapolis, and so we flew. What's that? The next one's in Dallas. So the church did approve, we put it to formal affirmation, and the church did approve the budget, of course, and in our church's budget was $2,000 was set aside for Corey and I to go to the SBC, and so that's what we did. We spent $2,000 to go to Indianapolis. It will be in Dallas next year, so that'll save us some money, assuming that we're still part of the SBC at that point. And you don't have to go as a messenger, you can go as a guest. So perhaps some of you are just itching to get into the fun of the SBC, and you could come along and observe the chaos from, what was the song that kept playing? Clown World is the song that kept playing every time we got in your truck. It was like a sign or something. Every time we got in Corey's truck to drive to the SBC convention, the song called Clown World came on. It's like, I think there's a sign here. So if you want to come to Clown World, Dallas next summer. So that's a little bit about cost. Basically $1,200 in giving to the cooperative program, and then whatever it costs to get our messengers there. At least at present, our church has decided that if we are going to be in the SBC, we want to send messengers to try to steer the direction. So that's where we're currently at. A little bit about benefits. So here are some of the benefits that the church provides to its paid pastors, and some of these are benefits that we derive from the SBC. American Funds has nothing to do with the SBC, but Jess has a simple IRA with them, so do I. The church offers as a benefit to Jess and I matching up to 3%, so that's just a benefit, just as we're listing out all the benefits. That doesn't have anything to do with SBC. Guidestone, not to be confused with Guidepost, that's an unfortunate name. Guidepost was the third-party organization that's LGBTQIA affirming that was hired 3 years ago to do this sex abuse investigation against the SBC. That's Guidepost. Guidestone is insurance. We're talking about Guidestone right now. I have dental and health through Guidestone, and so there's some details on that there. So it is nice that I have access to Guidestone through the SBC that I wouldn't otherwise have. It's difficult for our church really to have access to insurance plans at all. Whenever we had the school, we had 50-something employees, and so it's easier to create a group and to have benefits for that group. Jess and I are the full-time employees, and so it's pretty difficult to create a group and to have insurance for he and I. But because of our participation in the SBC, we're part of that group. And so it provides cheaper health care to us. I think I pay $300-something a month for insurance versus my wife was just telling me about someone we know who has a family that's similar in size and similar ages, and they pay like $1,700 a month or something like that. So it does make insurance more affordable for my family. And then there's other options like Medishare and things like that. But I do take advantage of Guidestone in that way. One thing that's worth noting about Guidestone is they do not provide coverage for services, abortion services or abortion-inducing devices or drugs, right? So that's one nice thing about Guidestone as an insurance provider. So how do we have access to the benefits that come through Guidestone? Either membership in the SBC, being a cooperating church, or else, second, this is the bottom of page 2, membership with the state convention. Kevin talked on the phone to somebody who mentioned the Texas Baptist Convention, which is the General Baptist Convention of Texas, which we don't want to be a part of. So we're much better to be part of the SBC than to be part of the General Baptist Convention of Texas. We're part of the Southern Baptist Texas Convention. So 1 is good, 2 is not, 3 is something that's new to us, but if we were associated with neither of these, we could keep our accounts active and unchanged by being approved as a like-minded organization. Kevin said, I think this would be a simple 4-question form, essentially proving that we still hold to Tier 1 statement of faith. So that's interesting, something worth discussion, that we might still have access to these Guidestone benefits, even if we were not an SBC church, but if we were a like-minded organization. Basically, can we still affirm the Baptist faith and message? Yeah, we can. Pastor Jess, retirement 403B, and it has similar kind of stipulations, either membership in the SBC or membership in the state convention, or what we would do if we were neither. And then Kevin kind of listed alternatively, we could open, this is number 4, a 403B plan with someone like Fidelity, and in my 2 minutes of Googling it, it looks like the annual cost there would be $75. So if we were not under the SBC umbrella, there would be a $500 annual administration fee for having this 403B plan. That fee is waived, so that would be an additional $500 that the church is paying if we weren't part of the SBC, but because we are part of the SBC, that $500 fee is waived. But Kevin's like, but it looks like this other like Fidelity plan is like a $75 annual fee versus a $500 annual fee. Now, another thing that we would lose is for the 403B plan, Guidestone contributes an additional $17.50, so $200-something a year, which I need to open a 403B. Pastor Jess has one, but that would be a benefit that would be lost, is that additional $200 a year. But for the sake of argument, you could say, hey, let's not pay the $500 admin fee. Let me think about how the math and all this works. Anyway, okay, we're not getting the $500 fee waived anymore. Anyway, I think that the math works out to where it's like, I don't know that it's that great of a benefit that we're getting that additional $200 anyway, potentially. But it is a nice bonus and certainly a blessing to Pastor Jess's family, just as Guidestone is a blessing to my family. Southern Baptist of Texas Foundation, our church almost had to close its doors in 2018 whenever we closed Surgeon Academy. As far as we can tell, we would have closed our doors. Nobody would give us a loan, except for the Southern Baptist of Texas Foundation, which says we don't want to see gospel preaching churches close their doors. And so let us come in, let us walk campus with you, let us hear your heartbeat. And they said, we believe this is a faithful and gospel preaching church, and so we want to help you guys out as you get through this rough patch. And praise the Lord, we're in a much better place now, today, and the Lord has provided for us, and you, our faithful church family, has given above and beyond and generously, and so praise the Lord for that. But that has been a sweet blessing to us, where our church would have closed down. You know, the Lord can do anything he wants to, so the Lord could have used other means to keep our church open, but based on the information we had in front of us, we were days away from closing down and not being able to pay our teachers their last paycheck, had it not been for Southern Baptist of Texas stepping in and helping us out. So that was a nice benefit. However, we don't have to be associated with the SBC that deal is already done, right? So if we left the SBC, it doesn't put us in jeopardy. We still have that all lined out, if that makes sense. So that was one question, like, do we have to be part of the SBC? Is that going to jeopardize our relationship with the foundation? Kevin talked directly to the foundation. They said, no, it will not. So it's good information to know. And then lastly, the seminaries give a 50% tuition discount. Pastor Jess received that. I received that. I don't know if Pastor Michael was a part of an SBC church whenever he went to Southwestern, but he received it if he was part of an SBC church at that time. And so between that discount and just the 6 Southern Baptist seminaries being overall cheaper, it's like a third of the cost to receive a seminary education from the 6 Southern Baptist seminaries if you are a Southern Baptist member of the SBC. So anyway, those are some specific questions that we tried to answer. I don't really have a lot of time to do this. I kind of just wanted to give like a historical perspective on our partnership with the SBC, because at present, at least today, this moment, we're still cooperating with the SBC. That could change tomorrow. It could change the next day. It could change in a week or a month. But for the time that we're in, how should we think about that? So in 1792, William Carey famously called Christians to a missional understanding of the church, and he claimed that the Great Commission was for all Christians, not merely for the apostles of Jesus' day. And this is like marks the beginning of the modern missions movement. William Carey and calling the church to say, hey, the Great Commission is for all Christians. And so 1792 really kicked that off. And we have this language of rope holders, and that comes from William Carey and saying, hey, we'll go out. He went to India, but he said, hey, we'll go out as long as there are people back home holding the ropes for us. And William Carey was a great Baptist. We did a series on great Baptists a few years back for family camp and talked a little bit about William Carey. Well, in 1814, Baptist churches in the U.S. joined together to create the General Missionary Convention of the Baptist denomination. Then in 1845, we have, kind of splintering off from that, the formation of the Southern Baptist Convention. And then in 1925, the beginning of the cooperative program. So this is a little bit of the history of kind of the idea of cooperation among churches for the purpose of the Great Commission. And contemporary Southern Baptist churches have inherited this stewardship from faithful brothers and sisters who have gone before us. The cooperative program exists around the belief that we can do more together. And so let's lock arms together. Let's see what we can do when we join forces together, raise funds together. And so historically, the SBC has been a tremendous force for good and gospel advancement in the world. Now, we do, as Baptists, believe in local church autonomy. So there's not, we don't report to anybody. We're not a pointy-top organization where there's a pope at the head and Christ is the head of the church, right? But in terms of this local body, there's the elders, and we're just a self-governing body, right? So the SBC doesn't dictate what we do, right? We are an autonomous local church, and as an autonomous local church, we have chosen voluntary association with the SBC. And for the reason that the elders of Sojourn Baptist happily affirm the Baptist Faith and Message 2000, as we believe it aligns with our own church confessions. Now, the SBC is a massive and diverse body. So there's, Corey gave us a picture of that. You got Bart Barber, the then president, now he's been succeeded by another, but said, somebody once told me the most beautiful thing about the Southern Baptist Convention, the most beautiful and the most crazy thing about it is that anybody can get up and say anything. And so it is beautiful that there is a sort of, there's a lot of participation. You can get up and speak, and then sometimes crazy uncles get up. But so it's a blessing and a curse, but it is a hugely diverse body. And sometimes messengers say things that don't represent the interests of our church. And sometimes SBC officers say things that don't represent the interests of our church, which is why we send messengers to represent the interests of our church. And I would say this, that we still find commonality with the SBC on the most important things, on the main things. Our church is a Reformed Baptist church, and we affirm the Reformation slogan, Semper Reformanda, always reforming. So the need for ongoing reformation is true in our local church context, as well as in the context of a convention of churches. Of course, our primary responsibility is towards our local autonomous church. But nevertheless, it's right for us to cooperate with other like-minded churches, whether that be through the SBC or some other affiliation. We're looking into some things like the Reformed Baptist Church Network. But cooperation and affiliation is a good thing. I would argue that the SBC is one such worthwhile affiliation, not the only one. We support many missionary families that either we've directly sent out or that we have a direct relationship with. And so those are missionary engagements that we feel really good about. But as a part of the piece of the puzzle, historically we felt good about saying, hey, we'll lock arms with the SBC and support world missions through the IMB. So, but if this is a worthwhile affiliation, and if we choose such affiliation, we should make efforts towards reformation, if possible. So, what is the task that lays before us? I think it's easy to become maybe somewhat jaded and skeptical as we think about the current state of the SBC. Well, let's clarify for a moment the challenge that lays before us. Our fight is not the fight of C.H. Spurgeon against the full-blown liberalism of the Baptist Union, which outright denied the deity of Christ and the inspiration of Scripture. Our fight is not the fight of J. Gresham Machen, who similarly combated full-blown liberalism in his own Presbyterian denomination. Our fight is not even the fight of the conservative resurgence in the 1980s, where there was a denial of Scripture. There was full-blown teaching of evolution in the seminaries, abortion, not just pro-life, which we would say there's an inconsistent valuing of human life within the pro-life organization, but full-blown, like, abortion is good and fine for Christians. The SBC was there in the 1980s, whenever faithful brothers and sisters stayed in the convention and were able to steer the ship back towards faithfulness and conservatism. So that's not the fight that we're currently in. Ours is not the fight of the global Methodists who left the United Methodist Church because of its affirmation of LGBTQIA. We're not fighting that within the SBC, at least not at present. When I think about all these historical battles, then I'm personally grateful for the Southern Baptist Convention. Make no mistake, we have significant concerns with aspects of the SBC. There's a lot of work to be done. But let's not kid ourselves and think that the task that lays before us is anything like the task that was faced by these faithful men and women who came before us. That's not the fight that lays before us, at least not at present. And I'm still proud to bear the title of Southern Baptist so long as we remain in the convention. Mueller made an interesting comment with respect to the law amendment. There were messengers gathered at a 9 Marks event late one of the evenings, and there was a debate between Mueller and Bart Barber on whether we should be for or against the law amendment. Mueller is for it. But at one point, Mueller got impassioned and he said, "Don't screw this up for my kids." Like, vote the right way on the law amendment. Don't screw it up for my kids. Now, of course, Mueller is going to have a commitment to the SBC because he's one of the entity heads, right? But I think that we should have a similar feeling of stewardship and responsibility to this great convention of churches, that our kids after us may become the inheritors of this convention. And we want to maintain the faithfulness of the SBC if possible, if we can steer it back in the right direction before it's too far gone. And I think we have a long ways before it's too far gone. So what a tremendous force for good the SBC is, I would say. Again, I would challenge you, you can get on the Twitterverse or the Xverse, whatever it's called these days, and focus on all the negatives within the SBC, and there is a lot of negative, but I would challenge you to think about 10 good things about the SBC, and I bet you could do it if you would do that. The SBC represents some massively important institutions and millions of dollars given towards missions. Our church has an opportunity to play a part, however small, in steering the direction of the SBC's stewardship of these institutions and missions dollars. And so I would argue, isn't that worth playing a part in while we can still find substantial agreement with the SBC on the main things? It's likely that one day, this is just on a personal note, as I think about college for my own kids, DBU is way too expensive for me. But Texas Baptist College is the undergraduate institution that's associated with Southwestern Seminary. And it's likely that one or maybe multiple of my kids will go to that school as an affordable school for higher education. And I would hope to, as far as it depends on me, if I could have any say or any influence over that institution, I would hope to maintain the integrity of that institution if and when my kids land there. So the bottom line is this. I know we've gone over time, but I don't think we should throw in the towel yet. There's still much good in the SBC, and it's worth fighting for. I'm getting tapped. I've gone over my time. It would be a shame for us to leave when so many good churches still remain in the SBC. If all the good churches leave one by one, and tragically at some point our denomination will go the way of so many other denominations, so many other institutions have. The conservative resurgence was a beautiful, a happy ending, whereas so many denominations and institutions have died because of liberalism. The Southern Baptist Convention was able to revive in the 1980s. And so let's not let our story of our convention be like so many other conventions and so many other institutions. Let's not let the SBC repeat that cycle. Let's instead stay in the fight to preserve what's good about the SBC and endeavor, insofar as it depends on us, to reform it for the sake of its historic institutions, its missionary dollars, and for the benefit of future generations. So, again, I think we have a lot to think about here. We've discovered some things that we didn't know before. Jesus Christ is going to build his church with or without the SBC, right? If the SBC just went totally liberal tomorrow and we decided to leave it, ultimately it would make small waves in our church. The SBC doesn't dictate what Sojourn Baptist Church does, and yet we are allowed to have a voice within this convention of churches. And so if we can steer the ship for good, I think it's a worthwhile opportunity and endeavor. But this is an ongoing conversation among the elders and amongst the church body, which we have left 0 minutes for you guys to talk about. So I guess what I would say is this: if you're able to stick around for a few minutes and we can field some questions, we can do that now. But I'll also plan for as much time as we need in Sunday school on Sunday for us to do that then as well. I know it's kind of hard because we lose momentum. We're here, we're freshly talking about it. But anyway, if you're able to stick around, you have any questions, concerns, you can raise those now if you're able to stick around a few minutes. And if we want to, we can spend more time in Sunday school on Sunday. So that was a fire hose blast of information. Anything we want to address right here and now, and we can address more later. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I would say the guy who just stepped out, Bart Barber, was actually a godly man of integrity who we had some significant disagreements with and who actively opposed some of the things that our church stands for. In particular, he was against the law amendment. He is pro-life and against the abolition of abortion. So we have some significant disagreements with him. But he was a man of integrity, so the outgoing president, I would say, still did some good, even though we had significant disagreements with him. The incoming president was not our first choice, but as it came to a runoff, Dusty Devers, one of the guys in the picture, said, "Hey guys, vote for this guy." And that guy, whatever his name is the guy who got elected as the president now and going forward. I would say the new head of the executive committee is not great, so that's kind of discouraging. He gave a convention address that seemed very kind of nasty and directed at people like us, troublemakers trying to mess up the SBC. So that's not encouraging. But I think that knowing nothing about the man himself, who is the new president, I think that he has maybe some more theological alignment with us than Bart Barber did. So we shall see how that all shakes out. What do you say? There was a guy named Jared Moore, and so there was kind of a plan among the abolitionists where Dusty nominated Jared Moore as president, and then Jared Moore nominated another guy as first VP, and then that guy nominated another guy as second VP. So it was a plan to get all abolitionists as those officers. I think maybe none of those guys got in. Jared, if I can be brutally honest, I actually didn't vote for him because I don't think he's seemingly a godly and very gifted dude. He's not, from what I could tell, a leader that would lead the SBC. There's another guy who's a preaching pastor who I know from Southwestern who I actually initially voted for. So I'm just disclosing my own votes. I'm not sure if Corey voted for Jared Moore. But anyway, Jared Moore got the least amount of votes of all of the candidates for SBC president. So that was the kind of first pick that was being touted by our abolitionist friends, even though I didn't vote for him. But then the second pick that Dusty was like, well, what about this guy? And that guy did get voted in. So that was good. So much to cover. Well, certainly, y'all feel free to send emails, calls, texts. I know ideally it's nice when we can address it as a gathered body because the elders can address these things one-on-one with you guys. but it's nice for y'all to be able to hear each other and for us to talk about it as gathered together. So maybe my encouragement to you would be come to Sunday school on Sunday. If you have further questions or concerns, take this stuff home. Maybe Corey can send out his presentation, tonight or tomorrow or something. So look through this stuff, mull over it, and if further questions and concerns are raised, bring those on Sunday, because, you guys' input, questions, concerns play a significant role in what the elders choose to do going forward. So anyway, I know it's 7:30 and we've already gone 15 minutes past, but anybody else who wants to stick around and chat can. Otherwise, we'll plan to spend as much time as we need to in Sunday school on Sunday. And once the conversation ends, then we'll move on with 2 Corinthians as usual. Thank you guys for being here tonight, for being generous with your time to stick around for a few extra minutes. And please do let us know any other questions or anything we can answer. And we'll talk more Sunday if y'all would like.